welcome to W.R. Frady's Friday Night Frights. I'm your host, W.R. Frady, and I'd like to welcome you back to our second installment of Family Ghost Stories. Now, in our previous episode, you met with Edna Frady, who told you some of her experiences in the old house on Lacy Road, as well as some of her ghost stories from her life growing up, and some of what would also become legends of Lacy Road, as they are tied to the family that grew up and lived on Lacy Road. Now, that being said, I would like to continue with my own set of stories for tonight that will bring this entire episode full circle in a double feature that I hope you'll find entertaining, fun, and perhaps lead to let you have a few ghost stories of your own to tell. So, without further ado, let's get you something hot to drink, some popcorn, a snack, or just sit back and relax as we get started with Family Ghost Stories, Part 2. Now, my first tale comes from the old house on Lacy Road, and a boy, a teenager in the 7th grade, who roughly enjoyed having a midnight snack before going to bed and reading and enjoying a good Friday night like he had a tendency to do. This I call the thing in the hallway. You see, Randy loved to stay up on Friday nights, reading, drawing, listening to music. Most of all, it was reading that he enjoyed doing. And, well, being a teenager, to be able to fuel having that kind of a night of adventure and fun, you had to have food to kind of keep things going. So what Randy would do is he would grab a quick bite to eat before settling in for the night. On this particular occasion, he had a couple of hamburgers that were left over from the night's dinner. And the hamburgers were good, and he was well along in eating them. And his dad, as it was getting close to his dad's bedtime, his dad turned off the TV, and as he walked by the living room, he looked at Randy and said, "Hey, boy, it's time for you to, start getting things wrapped up so you can go on getting your bed." And he said, "I'm heading on to bed too." So he went over, cut off the light, and went on to bed. Well, as Randy sat there, he continued eating the burgers. I mean, he had agreed with his dad and said, "Yeah, I'll hurry. I'm just going to finish eating these burgers and then I'll go on to bed." Well, a little while passed. He had finished his first burger and was working on his second when Randy looked up into the living room where the dining room light was spilling through the doorway into the living room because he thought he saw a movement. And as he looked up and was sitting there watching, on the far wall where the light was hitting, just where his dad had went by, or probably maybe 5-10 minutes earlier, a shadow moves across the light. And at first, in his mind, he was like, okay, this is just popping in. As he thought, he's like, wait a minute. And Randy looked closer, was like, that shadow had no source. It was just a shadow on the wall. And the hair kind of stood up on Randy's skin. That was odd. That wasn't right. So he kept a suspicious look to the living room as he finished up his last burger. Excuse me. And so as he finished up that burger, and he got up, put his plate away, went to the restroom, and come back out. He was still kind of glancing and watching toward the living room, but he didn't see anything more. Went over, cut off the dining room light, and as he crossed the long, dark hallway that separated the dining room from the stairwell and the basement door to go to his room, Randy stopped because he noticed there was something or someone standing in the hallway. And the more he looked at it, he realized it wasn't a someone and was more of a something. As it stood there in a billowing cloak-like form, and to the best description that he could bring to mind was that its head had a very potato-like shape to it, with red burning eyes that burned like the coals of a fire that had just about to die, just searing red, and they were focused on him. And Randy was froze. He was just staring. I mean, if it wanted to get him as close as it was to him, if it wanted to get him, there was no way he would even be able to get out of the way before it could reach out a hand, appendage, talons, whatever it might have had, and grasped him. For it wasn't much farther than an arm's reach from where he was. So, taking it step by step, Randy skulked sideways until he got into his room and closed the door. Excuse me. And he closed the door. And he went over and grabbed the pull chain to his light and made sure it was on. And turned it on and made sure. Then he went over and he sat for a few minutes. And then, laying across his bunk bed instead of long ways, he turned off the light and just kind of laid there to relax, trying to process what all was going on in his mind. But he didn't have long to process, however, as the rabbit ear TV antenna on his small TV that housed his gaming system just began whipping back and forth, as if something was sitting there shaking it and moving it and just back and forth. And seeing this, Randy reached up and grabbed the pull chain and turned on the light right quick, and it continued to move back and forth, just waving back and forth, and then all of a sudden stopped, dead, as if something was just holding it, as though it had never moved to begin with. Chills ran up and down Randy's spine. He went over, he checked everything. There was nothing out of place, nothing unusual, only a misplaced shadow. A thing that stood in the hallway looking at him with burning coals for eyes, and that ominous whipping and waving of the antenna of the TV. Randy didn't turn off the light that night, and he got very little sleep until the sun itself came up the next morning. However, that night would be a night that Randy would go to remember for the rest of his days. Well, our second story takes us from crossing a long, dark hallway to get to a bedroom while ominous figures from beyond are watching from the shadow, to a night in the bathtub, where Randy has developed this fascination with a mini recording device and it has a tendency to be recording things. But it's what he captures that night is what turns an ordinary bout of fun and mischief into something much more ominous. I call this a hiss from beyond the void. Randy had spent the weekend at his sister's. He would take his Nintendo and they would spend the weekend renting, playing Nintendo games, and just kind of hanging out and chilling. While he was there, he became fascinated with this mini tape recorder. It was like a voice recorder that used micro tapes like you'd see in an answering machine. And immediately Randy's creative mind and imagination come up with all kinds of quirky things he could do with that recorder. And he would begin making goofy recordings and just doing stupid, silly things. And that was, when he wasn't playing Nintendo, that was how it all would go. But then it came time on Sunday night for him to get his bath and get ready to go to bed to start his next school week. And so Randy had a bright idea. He was like, you know what? I'm going to take the voice recorder in the bathroom with me, and I'm going to record what time I'm taking a bath and just make weird, crazy sounds and stuff. And that's where it all began. I was just, he was just recording his things and listening to and making and just jabbering and singing and doing stuff in the bathtub that while he was doing that, and all seemed uneventful and very well and easy to go. But recording's not a recording unless you go back and listen to it to see what all you sounded like and doing just your own candid, And he hit the play button. He rewound it. He hit the play button. He had the sound of the water running, the sound of him singing, splashing, soaping up. And it was just at first a normal thing, but at one point when he was singing, and he knew this part of the song that was coming up, his voice became overshadowed by a deep hiss that sounded something like Randy was taken aback. He was in that bathtub and he was present that entire time, and not once did anything come into that bathroom that would make that hiss. It didn't come from the bathtub. It passed in front of the recorder itself. And so the chills run down Randy's spine. He'd rewind it and listen it again. There it was. Same spot every time. And yet he knew when he was in there, he was facing the area where that recorder was sitting on the shelf as he was doing his bath. So it wasn't like somebody come into the bathroom on him and tried to do a prank. He would have seen that. And that sound had only been heard one time before. During a night when Randy and Stacy had sat up playing video games, and voices from beyond were calling them out into the hallway. But that is another story for another time. And now my final story jumps ahead by a couple of years. On a weekend when Randy is home by himself. His family has gone to Georgia. And Randy is enjoying the solitude of being at home in the old house on Lacy Road by himself. Now, Randy has always had this tendency to like to be on his own and do things. But this weekend left him wishing that perhaps he might have been better off having somebody there so that they could see what he saw. And it all began in the middle of the night, on a Saturday night, when Randy's family would not be back until the next day. And a storm had rolled in. And Randy was watching his favorite vampire movie on TV, or on the VCR, when this storm was rolling in. And the lightning would flash outside. And every once in a while, Randy would pause and go look outside to watch the rain, not watch the lightning, to see, kind of gauge how bad the storm was going to be. And every so often it would light up with a bright flash that would illuminate the yard, the old field down below, all the way. I mean, when the lightning would flash, you could see it all the way down to the lower road as if it was daytime, but only for a second or so. Well, Randy got up during one of the times when it was flashing and was looking out down across the old field and stuff when the lightning flashed and something eerie caught his eye. For when the lightning flashed way down at the curve, there was a cloaked figure, just like in white. It might not even have been cloaked. It could have been in a dress, but all he knew is that it was a white humanoid figure standing down at the curb facing the house. And he could still see it when the lightning flashed, and the white lightning flash had faded out. He watched. And then the thunder rolled, the rain came down, and the lightning flashed again. And Randy had not taken his eyes off of that area, but when the lightning lit up the field again, it was gone. To this day, Randy has no idea what it was he saw down there, but he knows one thing for certain. It wasn't human, and it was watching the old house. And this concludes our collection of family ghost stories for this week. I thank you for watching this double feature of episodes, and I hope that you find them both entertaining, maybe a little creepy, especially knowing that these are true ghost stories, ones that I would call Legends of Lacy Road, especially the ones that have taken place in the old house on Lacy Road. And with that being said, there is going to be a special episode of W.R. Frady's Friday Night Frights, which is going to be a Legends of Lacy Road live from Lacy Road. Not really live, but it will be filmed on location at the house on Lacy Road. And I will have a couple of guests on for that. People who have been there and experienced that house as well. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next Friday night, right here on the W.R. Frady channel. I hope you have sweet dreams, be safe, and I will talk to you soon. See you in the shadows.